Hi, good morning, and welcome to the Football Digest Extra show with me, John Cross, and also my colleague Simon Bajkowski. Good morning to you all. And we're going to analyse now, look back upon the game from Stamford Bridge yesterday. Chelsea 1, Manchester City 3, and a hugely interesting game for all sorts of different reasons, really. The Chelsea defeat, what does that mean for Frank Lampard? And I must say, I'm sure, Simon, you'll agree, you've seen City more than me, but I mean, City were awesome too. We shouldn't forget in the criticism and sort of analysation of Chelsea and Frank Lampard just how good City were. I don't know what you think, but I feel as if we've not seen City play this well and to such a high level since those back-to-back title winning seasons. Or am I getting a little bit carried away?
No, I think you can get carried away with that. It's not been a vintage year for City, really. They've struggled to create good chances. They've struggled to take their chances. And they've really not been good against the top sides for probably a year, 18 months now. So I don't think many people saw that performance at Chelsea coming, because they were blistering on the counter and scored some really good goals, didn't they?
Yeah, absolutely, they did. And we were asking Guardiola questions afterwards, weren't we? And one that, caused him to kind of flounce back in his chair was from me saying, "No, they're in the title race." I mean, it's a given, isn't it? I know it's an unpredictable season, and they're missing players, other clubs are missing players, but I just think they're irresistible. They have to be in the title race right now.
Yeah, it's been a strange season, really strange. And because there's times when Tottenham looked like they were leading the way, Liverpool, United, Arsenal, Chelsea, they've all had moments where you thought they could really challenge. And then they've had moments where you thought they couldn't. And City haven't really had those moments yet this season. They've been mid-table, struggling for goals, not really doing that. But to go to Chelsea with 6 players out with COVID, and produce that performance, it sort of thinks, there's so much more to come from them. And they're 4 points behind Liverpool and United with a game in hand. They've got a very good run of fixtures coming up. They have to be in the title race.
Yeah, no, sure. I do think that the fluency was really impressive, wasn't it? And I think that basically, that understanding. I mean, to start the game without a recognised striker. I think we all thought that maybe Sterling would play false 9. Kevin De Bruyne, I don't know what about you, but surprised me that it's obviously not a new role for him. We know that, but he again, De Bruyne, you run out of superlatives to say about him, but the way that he encompassed and embraced that role and did so well was great, wasn't it?
Yeah, he's just a phenomenal player, and the assist for Foden for the second, and just the way he gets and dominates the ball and the game whenever he gets a chance. But the defence as well, they weren't really troubled by Chelsea for most of the game. I mean, you'll have sort of watched John Stones a lot throughout his career and for England as well, but he certainly looks in kind of a really good moment.
Is that the thing that struck me about that, Simon, was that basically John Stones, I really like John Stones. I think he's a really good player, because he's obviously so good on the ball. There was a couple of times, in this strange new world that we live in, you sort of kind of, at Chelsea, you spread right across one stand. And I was right at the front of the stand, and you sort of very up close to the pitch. And in that, what had been first half, when City were attacking from that side, Stones was over our side. And honestly, when Chelsea were trying to press early on and put him under pressure, he just looked so comfortable and so composed, so elegant with the ball at his feet. And the other thing that really struck me was that sort of in his resurgence was that, they've signed how can I put it? It's almost like the polar opposite of Stones, in a real no-nonsense strong defender who, lazily we'd probably put as sort of like, pigeonhole as typical English defender. And yet there's Ruben Dias, basically heading it, kicking it, thumping it into Rosehead, which he literally did once, didn't he? And I don't know, maybe it strikes as it's sort of kind of, it's the perfect antidote for Stones, because, if Laporte obviously has had injury issues lately, but it makes you suddenly think, could Diaz and Stones be the first choice, partnership moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, Diaz is kind of that company figure that City have been missing, whereby, you know, he does that no nonsense defending, but he just inspires confidence from everyone around him. And it's pretty much a year since City got Port Vale in the FA Cup, and the Port Vale striker said, "Oh, I want to play against John Stones because I can score every week against him." And then he played and he did score, and it felt like every time someone came up against Stones, they'd get the better of him. Whereas this season, he's just been the complete opposite, and like you say, sort of nothing phases him, and he's having to defend less almost because people aren't even trying it against him anymore.
I just love there was one bit of cushion control, which, you know, he turned direction and then basically was able to bring the ball out and then, you know, casually, you know, look up and then basically find a perfect pass. And I thought that's the Stones that that was really good. You know, and you know, was a fixture for England and for City, you know, and I thought that was great. And I think it just allows City to build, doesn't it? That's the difference.
Yeah. And, you know, City are much better for having a strong Stones in the team. But also, I mean, looking ahead to the Euros, like maybe September, October, things didn't look too great for England at centre-back. But Harry Maguire seems to be over his kind of iffy bit of form. Stones looks much better than he has done at any point over the last 2 years. So that's kind of encouraging looking ahead to the summer as well.
Yeah. Do you know what? A few weeks ago, people sort of questioning Raheem Sterling, weren't they? And saying basically he's not in great form, the stats, you know, and stuff. But I mean, blimey, he played well yesterday, didn't he?
Yeah. I think he'd be the first to admit he's not had a brilliant year, brilliant season, and he's not scored the goals that he wants. But he sets himself such high standards, and also he's played so much football. Like he's never injured, so he plays 3 times a week, every week, and that can take its toll. And he did look a bit jaded at times, but I think you saw at Chelsea that you know, he's that explosive running and making things happen. And even when, you know, the third goal, he looked to have sort of missed the chance and then found a way to bring it back. Sterling just creates goals and makes things happen, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. Yeah, Rodri. I think we're seeing maybe the best of Rodri. You know, because he was not. I don't know. It seems to have, you know, taken a while, doesn't it, for him to settle down? And we were thinking, is he a good signing? Is he, you know, is he a bit of a, you know, sort of another one that's not quite fitted in? But actually, I think he was good, you know, and I think that's a good run of form, isn't it, for him?
Yeah, he gets a lot of stick for not being Fernandinho, and Fernandinho kind of went unnoticed for a long while. And then the thing you began to notice about him was him sort of shutting down counter attacks, either sort of fairly or by foul. So Rodri doesn't do that, but he's a better passer. I think he's very slow and he can get caught out, but City are almost better when he nearly gets caught out. He plays sort of right on the edge. And I think City are better and quicker when he is almost getting caught out, because it means he can then sort of beat a man and play the ball forward. So it was just the first or second time this season that City have really clicked as a whole. And I know Chelsea kind of made it easy for them. But it was a really convincing performance sort of by the whole team, I think, yesterday.
Can they win the title this season?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they should be looking to win this title. I think, you know, last season Liverpool was so good that City dropped off and couldn't get anywhere near them. Whereas this season, I don't think there's any team that is kind of at the levels of City or Liverpool over the last 3 years. So it is right up there for any team to take advantage and go ahead and win it.
Yeah, it's a really interesting title race this season, isn't it? You know, I do think it's there. Maybe that's in itself giving City that room for encouragement. I don't know whether the strikers, if I was looking at pitfalls for City, is the strikers the biggest concern for Guardiola?
Yeah, I think so. They've not been able to play Aguero for basically the whole season. Gabriel Jesus, I think he went 10 hours on the pitch without scoring, which is not what you want from any number 9. They have struggled for goals. Again, Sunday was one of the first times really where the midfield have got forward and scored the goals, and they've had Ferran Torres filling in. He's now self-isolating as well. I'm not sure whether they're going to be able to rely on Sergio Aguero for for the season, basically because of his fitness struggles. So they definitely want a striker in summer. They want a priority marquee player to come in and be the sort of Aguero successor. Whether it's worth bringing that forward 6 months to January, whether they can bring it forward to January, you'll know these type of players don't really move in January transfer windows, so it's looking like they're going to have to play on without such a signing.
Yeah, it's always a battle, isn't it, to do decent business in January? And if you look at City's history, they've tended not to do that. Obviously, Laporte may be an exception, but generally they've not immersed themselves in that market, have they? I don't think.
No, I think all clubs kind of want to do their business in summer, and then they make sure that fills them in for the season. And they kind of see January as a bit panic buying, as in something's gone wrong, and the selling club will know if someone's in the market in January that they can add a few more million on and things like that. So all these complications come into place. They try not to deal in January, and I think like they've shown that at Chelsea. I think given they've done that without a full squad, when they do get all the players back, they should be able to come through that.
Do you think it's the end of the road for Aguero at the end of the season?
It is looking difficult for him to carry on with his fitness issues at the minute. It's always difficult the older you get to recover from such injuries, and Aguero doesn't recover very quickly from these things. I think in these next few months he's really going to have to show that he can still operate at the highest level to earn a new contract, because he is out of contract in summer. It's going to be very interesting to see what City do, because Lionel Messi could be available on a free in the summer. They've got the funds to go for him.
Still feels weird to say that, doesn't it? That sentence, that Lionel Messi could be available on a free. Messi and Aguero sounds like quite the dream ticket in attack, doesn't it? Just absolutely. It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, just the prospect of him coming to the Premier League would just be sensational. But whether Messi coming would maybe help Aguero's chances of staying, and kind of encourage him that bit further. But it's definitely up in the air as we sort of go into the second half of the season.
Do you think they've got Messi, in their sights, haven't they? And kind of with it, even whether they get him or not. But do you think they've got a number 9, a more classic centre forward in their sights as well? Is that your impression?
Yeah, Erling Haaland has kind of impressed a lot of people with his performances, and he sort of very much looks to be in that Aguero mould of sort of typical classic number 9, but just relentless goal scoring record. And I mean, Guardiola's a huge fan of Kylian Mbappe as well. He looks kind of more difficult to get hold of. But City are aiming right at the very top, and then they've still got faith in Gabriel Jesus, obviously, as sort of that number 9 that Guardiola really loves for his high pressing. So I think that they're definitely in the market for someone in that Aguero mould.
Yeah, it could be an interesting few months then, really, for City, if they're back sort of making that sort of statement of intent. Now, listen, another story out of City, this weekend was obviously the controversy over Benjamin Mendy, who obviously broke COVID rules and has apologised for doing so. City, have issued a statement offering some recourse, but also, obviously, making it clear they didn't approve of the regulation breach. But then it was really interesting to listen to Pep Guardiola post-match, wasn't it? To kind of, hear him do what a lot of managers do, which is defend their players. So I guess we shouldn't overlook that fact that the natural instinct is there, isn't it, to defend a player. But were you surprised that basically he measured that with saying, well, actually, he was only doing what a lot of other people up and down the country were doing, and footballers shouldn't be judged differently?
Yeah. Essentially, we don't know what Guardiola said to Mendy privately, but given that he spent the last week talking about how this is a non-partisan issue and it's a really serious issue, everyone needs to be aware of how serious it is, to then kind of just dismiss Mendy's indiscretions as everyone does it, or lots of people have done it, and he got a negative test, so it's fine. It did feel very jarring, and I don't really think Mendy's kind of behaviour can be brushed away like that, and just because he's a good guy or anything like that, it doesn't mean that he shouldn't necessarily be punished for what he's done. And City are obviously investigating, but it felt like there was a discussion to be had to at least think about whether he should be included for selection against Chelsea. I don't know what you thought about the press conference.
Well, I must say, I'm always loath to kind of, criticise a manager who comes out and gives an opinion, because you can dodge the issue, can't you? So,
yeah.
That the journalist in me always thinks about that as well. But I was just ever so surprised, if I'm honest, simply because I just think that we are a crisis point for the country. So many people getting the virus, and so many people dying from the virus on a daily basis. Pep Guardiola has been, personally affected, hasn't he? He's had a really, he's had a terrible bereavement close to him, family members. So, and I just think that Guardiola is such a respected voice within football, such a respected voice, that basically when he talks, people sit up and listen. And that's the point, really. I think that basically football, it is an interesting point at the moment where they've got special dispensation from the government to carry on amongst the elite sport. And football, does, I like to think, provide a bit of, comfort for the nation at a very, very difficult time. But the Premier League doesn't want to get involved. They've set the protocols. The FA won't get involved. And I just think if football continues to flout it in this way, if footballers continue to do it, then I think the government should turn around and say, well, sorry, but if you're not respecting our pleas and your own protocols, then we'll have to stop. And I think that would be the right thing to do. And that element is the thing that gets me about, because I think a lot of football fans up and down the country look to managers, look to players to set an example. They don't listen to politicians. They listen to what football is telling them. And at the moment, football is telling them that it's okay to go and break rules. It's not,
Yeah. And I think what felt disappointing was that Guardiola seemed to be sort of contradicting his own advice, because he has throughout this been saying, everything needs to be taken seriously. Listen to the scientists. Listen to what people are telling you to do. So to then, I know, defend his own player, but to appear to sort of make out that it wasn't as serious as it was, like you say, because so much resource from a lot of people has gone into making sure that the Premier League can go ahead. So Mendy's actions didn't threaten it because everyone tested negative, but that's not really the point, because they could have done.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is also, Simon, is that basically, I'm sure you sort of at Guardiola's press conference Friday, or heard what he said, and that basically, I just thought that was so powerful. What he said. He was strong. He said everything right, and basically, I personally think that Man City, some of the stick that they've had, and Guardiola in particular, about that Everton cancellation has been completely over the top, because you worry first and foremost about players and players' welfare and safety. I didn't like the last minute nature of the postponement, nor did I like that element about Tottenham Fulham. But I just think that that I think looks amateur, I must say, and doesn't reflect well on the league. But for City then to get the kickback as they have done, I think was grossly unfair. Having said that, I just think that basically, now what Guardiola says post-match allows people to kind of, look back and say, well, actually, were we right to support him after all? It's just, surely I like to think that the manager basically perhaps has been stronger in what he said, to Mendy privately. And as you rightly touched upon, that's often can be a different story, can't it? I think.
You would just like to think that that's the case, because, like you say, he was so strong on Friday, and he was right. This is about health of players, but you're in you can only really be in the position to say that those things if your own house is in order. And if you seem to be letting Mendy off because he's a nice guy and because he can shout from the sidelines, then it sort of dilutes the strength of what you were saying earlier in the week. So yeah, we wait and see how the club decide to go ahead with their investigation and what happens to Mendy. But it was just it's been an unfortunate week, hasn't it, with the Tottenham players and quite a few players breaking protocols over Christmas and New Year.
It does feel like that, and as you rightly say, it was a strange thing actually. Yesterday to see Mendy on the sideline shouting the encouragement, and he's clearly a very popular player amongst his teammates, isn't he? So he is a real character. And listen, clubs have got this strange bubble system where basically once they select the squad, it's difficult to take in and out. So basically, for first team games and for travel and everything that goes with it. And so Mendy was, part of a bench that was already understaffed, had one player short. And so I guess it is a dilemma to take him out. But I do think personally that's what they should have done. Simon, what did you make also then of Chelsea? Because there's been so much, written and said subsequently about Frank Lampard and his future. And do you feel as if from what you saw yesterday, we're at that point where a manager's future should be examined?
Yeah, I thought Chelsea were very poor. I think, like I said, it's been a strange season, and a few weeks ago we were all talking about how good Chelsea were, and they obviously did very well last season. I thought it was interesting in the press conference afterwards, Frank Lampard talking about the difference between Chelsea and Liverpool and City, almost trying to frame it as well. We're not at Liverpool and City's level. I kind of feel like if Chelsea were third behind Liverpool and City, that wouldn't be an issue. But it's the fact that they're being caught by all these other teams, and the race for the top four looks really, really complicated this year. That they seem to be in more of a problem. I mean, do you feel like they've regressed since last season?
I must say I'm in the probably in the Frank Lampard fan club a little bit. in the basic, I just think that he, last season it was in the mixer, wasn't it? Until the last, say, 4 or 5 games, whether they'd get in. And I remember sort of them going into a period where I think, they can't lose that one, otherwise they won't finish, top 4. And then basically it felt to me as if there was a big achievement, bearing in mind they had a summer transfer ban. They ended up really not doing anything, in January as such for that season. And under those circumstances, he blooded a lot of kids. The energy was good. The vibe was good. It felt like a refreshing new dawn for Chelsea, and they got them in the top 4. Lost the FA Cup final, but I still think that was a really impressive and big achievement from Lampard. But people were saying that they would finish mid-table. They really were. And, it would be a struggle for Chelsea. And to get in the top 4 was something else. I thought it was a big achievement. And we're not even at the halfway point of the following season. And I think that's why I think that basically the judgment calls that are being made now are grossly unfair and too early. Bearing in mind that you put 3 wins together and Chelsea would all of a sudden be knocking on the door for top spot, let alone top 4. And that's the issue, really, for me. That no one can get any consistency, and I think Chelsea is still work in progress. I think where the issue comes up is that they spent 200 million in the summer. It was a huge investment in players. Lampard did try, as you rightly say, Simon, is basically trying to frame them that they're work in progress and they've still got time. And City and Liverpool were given time. Well, they did sign Timo Werner for 50 odd million. And so Timo Werner is a well-established German international who played in the Champions League for Red Bull Leipzig and is a very, very good player. Thiago Silva is also an experienced head. I think where perhaps we're seeing things, a little bit differently is Kai Havertz. What's going on with him? Is he going to fit in that style? Is Lampard getting the best out of him? And I just think at the moment we haven't got a position to put him in for Chelsea. which I think sometimes is the system or English football. And I personally think that, you know, Lampard deserves time and a bit of patience. And I'm surprised, I don't know what you think about this, is that basically that club legend status, how quickly that disappears. Lampard arrived saying it will last 5 minutes and was realistic about it. Well, it feels like it's going already.
Yeah. I mean, it should buy him more time, that, because he does get the club, and I think it does help you to be in that position. I think you're absolutely right. Like, the transfer window has not helped him at all, because he got credit last year for doing so well with the transfer ban, and then you go out and you spend so much money, and it looked like Werner was starting to click, and then he's gone off the boil. Havertz started quite well and then has disappeared as well. Like you say, Thiago Silva, Mendy, they had the issue with Kepa earlier in the season, and it doesn't feel like much of their transfer business has paid off, and you're always under pressure when that happens. I mean, to me, they just look so flat and without a reaction when City scored the first goal and the second goal, and they didn't deserve anything from the game. But I mean, like I say, Chelsea now look like what Arsenal looked like 3 weeks ago, and you thought they're completely out of ideas. The coach can't get his instructions through to the players. Where do they go from here? And Arsenal have picked up, and they're now 3 points behind Chelsea, I think. So, you know, Lampard wants time. You would like to think that he will get more time to keep on what he's doing. Do the Chelsea sort of hierarchy seem fairly content with him?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't think he's in immediate danger, but equally, I don't. You know, we all know what Chelsea is like, and I think that basically, you know, that's the thing, isn't it? That legendary status doesn't even buy you credit at a club like Chelsea, and I think that's a hard one to take. So I don't, you know, I don't think they'll allow them to drift. Basically, I think that if they can see that we're definitely not going to make the top four, and if we make a change, then it might get us a top four place, while top grade coaches are available, experienced coaches are available. I think that's the scenario that would worry me if I'm Frank Lampard right now. But I personally, I think that he, you know, I think they should see it as going in a different direction. We've had so much of boom and bust at Chelsea, in that basically change the manager, I'll kind of, you know, go for a world-class manager, experienced head. I just think that basically we've had enough of it, basically. It has brought Chelsea great success. You know, please don't get me wrong. I mean, it's brought them trophy after trophy after trophy, season and year after year. But I just think if you're going to go down that a slightly different route with as they did do with Lampard, then I personally think that basically they need to stick with that and stick with that kind of philosophy, really. You know, because you know, they were well beaten, weren't they? Really, I mean, that was a really poor first half, wasn't it? I think, to be honest.
Yeah, they were well beaten, but there have been some good young English players brought through at Chelsea, and the point for Chelsea for many years was they had the best academy in the country, and it never really saw its way to the first team. And it has to be a good thing if these young English players are getting a chance in the first team and showing what they can do. And I guess if you get rid of Lampard, does that go again?
It's a different.
Does the next manager that come in have that same will or ambition or even sort of need to keep developing those players? So yeah, I mean, it's a results business, and Lampard needs to get results. But I do like what he's tried to do in the job.
Yeah, absolutely. I must say, I think that third goal said everything about the game, didn't it? Really, basically, there was a comedy moment, I think, in the Champions League when Man United were in Istanbul, weren't they? And basically, there was that breakaway goal which embarrassed them, and it wasn't far off it. Really, basically, it was like a sort of a cartoon sketch from Roadrunner with Raheem Sterling sort of bursting away from N'Golo Kante, and then that sort of burst. But I tell you, on a more serious point, it does tell you that the sort of kind of City, you know, full of pace and movement and ideas, and they're breaking away. Whereas Chelsea, their structure of the team must be wrong. That basically, if, you know, to coin a very modern, up-to-date phrase, you know, if you're going to get caught in transition, like that, you know, it's a bad look, isn't it? That basically your team setup must be wrong, I think, and that's the worry for Lampard, for me. That if you're going to get done like that on a goal from your own free kick on the edge of the opposition box.
Is that what's gone wrong with Chelsea, do you think, in the last few weeks and months? Because you know, when Thiago Silva came in, there was a lot of praise from early doors. Mendy seemed to make a big difference to the defence, but it kind of seems to have fallen apart a bit.
Yeah, I think Mendy did really well, and I think, you know, Mendy now has not kept a clean sheet in his, you know, in 5 of his last 6 games. You know, Chilwell has been really good going forward, and you know, he had a torrid time against Sterling, and then basically, you know, I do think they missed Reece James. Reece James is much more aggressive and, you know, good at, you know, attack is the best form of defence with him. And I think Zuma and Thiago have actually been a good partnership. But actually, I think maybe if you know, you're taking away that kind of, you know, protection, you know, and some, you know, the sort of missing there, you know, one of the fullbacks, then that perhaps leaves them on edge. I think he's still looking for the best midfield combo. I think the best midfield combo defensively would be Jorginho, Kante, and Kovacic, you know, but then basically sometimes, you know, sometimes that can leave you a little bit flat and lacking creativity. So you put Mount in there, and then all of a sudden you've got a bit of an issue that it's, you know, you haven't got as much protection for the defence if you're taking one of those players out to get Mount in. So maybe you have to go back to kind of a, you know, a more conservative 3 and play Mount, you know, further forward. And then also you got to sort out the kind of the Werner dilemma, in the basic Werner, you know, he isn't very happy or kind of is short of confidence playing wide. Well, you just got to, you know, somehow get Giroud or Abraham in, because that's going to get you goals and carry more of a threat. So you know, I do think it's about that structure, I think, at the moment. So I think he's got to use the next, you know, week or so, Lampard, to really kind of find that structure and get back to that basics, really. But you know, let's see. Interesting times. So,
yeah, very much so.
Yeah. Anyway, Simon, thanks so much. I really appreciate you joining. It's good to see you, and thanks everyone for tuning in and watching. Much appreciated. Thanks for joining us on Football Digest Extra.